Good day, family. Welcome to African Spiritual Conversations. And we have the honor and the privilege today of being joined by our dear brother Kwasi. Akan, is it?
Yes.
Am I saying it right? Okay, great. I'll be working on that. So thank you for agreeing to come and talk with us today. And of course, we have Ia Colette. First of all, I want to say thank you again. Me and Ia Colette have talked about you a few times since you've been on the show before. So we're very happy and excited to have you on here to have this spiritual conversation. Can you tell us all, for some of the people who may not know, what is the meaning of your name and what is your traditional or spiritual background?
Okay. So, well, first and foremost, I say thank you for, inviting me to the show. I know you can invite anybody on the show, so I really appreciate that. My full name is Ojirafo Kwesi Radnehem Pata Akan. So Ojirafo is a title. In the Akan tradition, Ojira means purification. So it has to do with a purificatory title, ritual title with regard to my function. But in the Akan tradition, Kwesi is what we call a Kradin, or a so-called soul name. So if you hear somebody named Kwame or Kofi or Ama or Afu and so forth, and you'll learn about the fact that you're born on a certain day and you have names associated with the day. So they'll call them Dadin or day names, but they're actually Kradin or soul names. So we're named after the deity. And our common term for deity is Abosom. Just like Orisha in Yoruba, Vodou in Ewe and Fon, and Arusi in Igbo. Abosom is the general term for divinity, divine force and creation in Akan. So the divinities that govern the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies that govern the 7-day week, they animate those forces. We are named after those divinities, and they govern the head. So if you're born on a specific day, I was born on a Sunday, and Awusida or Akwesida. So the divinity that governs that animates the sun and so forth in that context is the divinity Awusi. So I'm Kwa Asi or Kwa Awusi or Kwesi, meaning my Okra is governed by Awusi. The term Okra or Okra in Akan is the same as Ori in Yoruba. So this inner spiritual head, the Ori Inu in Yoruba, is called the Okra for males and Okrawa for females in Akan. So that's the divinity that governs the soul, the divinity in the head region. So that's where Kwesi comes from. And Radnehem Ptah Akan, it has to do with lineage. So my tradition is the Akan tradition. That's my ancestral tradition that manifests in North America as the hoodoo tradition. The term hoodoo is an Akan term, just like mojo and jackball and kanche and so forth. So we get into that, but just like some of our people were forced over here from the Yoruba tradition and continued the traditions. And in North America, that becomes the Juju tradition, which is Juju is a Yoruba word. Akan people were forced over here as well. And we continue to practice Akan ancestral religion. And we use the Akan term Undu, which is pronounced hoodoo in North America. And just like the Ewe and Fon people came from Dahomey and so forth, they were forced over here and they continue to practice Vodou. And they still practice Vodou in North America. Having nothing to do with Haiti or South America, the Caribbean, we maintain the traditions right here for 300 plus years in North America. So the Akan tradition, we just continue to practice. So that's the foundational tradition.
So how did you know what your lineage traditions were? Like, how did you know that, considering all that has happened to the descendants of enslaved Africans? How did you know that?
So it's a couple of ways that one can, reconnect with their what we would call our spirit genetic blood circle. So you can do genealogy. People are very proficient in genealogy. You can find out a number of things. There's ancestry.com. You can find records of, even going back to so-called enslavement and the so-called slave rolls and so forth. We found people going back to the early 1800s. Some people have found people in the early 1700s in these different records. So there's a lot of information that way. But and you can also take DNA tests and so forth. That'll give you some aspect, a snapshot. But the most direct way, your grandparents and great-grandparents and great-great-grandparents, they know who they are. They know that when they were forced over here, they know what language they spoke. They still speak that language and so forth. They're still connected to us spirit-genetically. So we communicate with our ancestresses and ancestors, and they will show us exactly who we are. And they will speak to us in our ancestral dialect, our language. But then they will also show us what we've been doing ever since we were children and our families, and show us contextually that if we were Akan and we were practicing hoodoo, and you compare what the hoodoo tradition and the motifs and the language and the ritual practices, and then you compare that with Akan tradition, you'll see it's the same tradition. If you look in the Juju tradition in North America and you see the language that's used and the ritual movements and the approach to life, and compare that to the Yoruba tradition, you'll see it's the same people. So they will show us contextually, we've been practicing the tradition the entire time, but they will speak directly to us. When your mother or great-grandmother or great-great-grandmother transitions, they communicate with us at the shrine, they communicate with us out away from the shrine, they communicate with us in dreams, they communicate with us showing up, and some people can see them clairvoyantly or hear them clairaudiently and so forth. We have that direct capacity and responsibility to communicate with our ancestresses and ancestors. So that's the most direct path.
Crazy, can I ask you a question on that? How do you go about getting this direct line or this direct communication with your ancestor to find out exactly to find out what your lineage is?
Well, we always say and the various traditions that we come from is all, we're fundamentally the same people. It's just like, if we migrate from Mississippi and end up in New York and New Jersey and Chicago and Detroit and California, we came from the same place. People who are Yoruba and Akan and Ewe and Igbo and Basa and Fula and everything else, we have an ancient shared, ancestry. So we have fundamental things are going to be the same. And the central institution of learning or instruction is your ancestral shrine. Those are the experts in the tradition.
Okay.
It's not PhDs, it's not linguists, it's not, academics. The experts in the tradition is establishing an ancestral shrine. It doesn't have to be an elaborate, some people are taken aback because they see these elaborate shrines and elaborate ritual. But first and foremost, you're just like when your great-grandparents were alive and you would ask them to come over your house and sit down, you give them some food, something to drink, ask them how they're doing, and then you sit down and then they communicate with you. When they transition, they have the capacity and the responsibility to do the same thing. So we give offering, we invite them through ritual invocation, they come forward, and then we sit down and listen. And then they will show us things throughout the course of the day, everyday life, to confirm the things physically, what they showed us spiritually, to bring that full confirmation.
Okay, yes.
Wow. So what was your journey to that? Like, how did you know that you were Akan? I mean, that was your, you used the term spiritual genetic lineage, like spiritual belief. How did you know that?
Well, now, initially I did. So starting off, like many of us, we start off from the time your children growing into adulthood, you start studying, true history and so forth. And you want to see what's going on and how we got to the position we are in right now, just in this country and just around the world, wherever Afro-Akani people or African Black people, our condition worldwide, we have a natural inclination to find out what's going on, what we need to correct ourselves and so forth. So studying what we say true history, started that process. And we started learning about ancient civilizations and all the various things we didn't learn in school, of course. But you can study about ancient civilizations, you can study about ancient Khanid and Kemet and pyramids and tombs, and we started language and botany and everything else. But then at some point you're going to have an inclination to say, well, what was the cultural foundation that allowed us to produce these things, to attune to nature and the patterns in nature and replicate that as this divinely ordered civilization? So we have that natural inclination to, it's an ancestral mandate to find out who we are. So on one hand through study, but at some point that takes you to ritual, because you want to find out spiritually what's real, what's the foundation of these things that we've been studying. And it's through that ritual process that the Nsamanfo, as we call them, they're Egungun in Yoruba, but the Nsamanfo, the Nanonom Nsamanfo, as they're called in Akan, the spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors, they will come forward and communicate. You have some that are your most recent deceased, like your parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents, and so forth. But then you will have your great-great-great-great-grandparents who are part of your blood circle, the ones who were forced over here, the ones who were living in the village at some point, speaking their language, eating their foods and everything else, and they were forced over here. They'll speak to you directly in your ancestral language. They will show you which group you come from. And then you'll get it confirmed throughout the course of the day. They'll put somebody in front of you that speaks the same thing that they told you at the shrine in front of your face, somebody you don't know. And you'll get multiple confirmations. This won't just happen one time. Multiple confirmations until you're absolutely certain and sure, you know, who's who and what's what. But it's a process, it's a journey, but it's a rewarding journey.
So in the Akan tradition, what is that? What is the Akan tradition?
Okay, so and a lot of people are familiar with the Yoruba tradition because it became more, people were writing a lot about it, especially in the 90s. It was an explosion of literature, and then the internet jumped off at the same time. So a lot of people were putting the information out. So to explain it in that lens, just like the Yoruba people of Southwest Nigeria, they're one of the largest ethnic groups on the continent. They were forced over here and they maintain their traditions in different ways. The Akan people are the majority people in Ghana, as well as Ivory Coast. So between Ghana and Ivory Coast, before those borders existed, it was just a large landmass. But between Ghana and Ivory Coast, there are about 20 to 22 million Akan people. They're one of the largest ethnic groups on the continent, and they're one of the largest groups from whom we were taken to be brought over here. So the Yoruba, the Akan, the Bakongo, the Igbo, Mindi-speaking people, those are like, and Wolof people, those are like the major, huge groups that most of us came from. Ovambo peoples as well, in Central and towards South Africa and so forth. So those major groups ended up over here, and a lot of people, you'll find that people are drawn to those groups. You find people drawn to the Yoruba tradition. You find people in the, Gullah-speaking people, who are, many of them are Ovambo or, from Sierra Leone and Liberia and so forth, Mindi-speaking people and so forth. And
Uh-oh. You just froze. That's when it's getting good. Yeah.
I'm here, and I'm like waiting with bated breath for the next word.
Let's find out. Let me make him.
He'll come back.
Oh, okay. It went out real quick. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
we can. Good.
Okay. So, so those different groups. So then you'll find that, those who were taken from the Akan areas, they were forced over here and they continue to practice their traditions. So Akans are just simply an ethnic group. It's one of the largest in the western part of the continent, one of the largest on the continent. And there are many of us who are from that group. So in North America, Hoodoo is the Akan tradition. In Jamaica, when you hear about Obia is from the Akan term Obayi. So Akan people were forced into Jamaica. They continue practicing Akan ancestral religion under the title Obia. In South America, in Suriname, they call it Winti. So the Akan people who were forced into Suriname, they continue to practice Akan ancestral religion. They call it Winti from the Akan term Quinti. In Guyana, when you see the traditional religion called Komfa, that's from the Akan term Okomfo. So the Akan people who ended up in Guyana, they continued their tradition as Komfa. So wherever we ended up, we use different Akan terms to identify a tradition. And it's the same thing with Yoruba people. In North America, they call it Juju. In Cuba, they call it Lukumi. In Brazil, it's Candomblé and so forth. But wherever they were dropped off, they continued to practice tradition. So yeah, Akan people are no different. It's just it wasn't as popular, as far as being published about or things like that. So we've been publishing and talking about it, and because there are millions of Akan people, there are millions of Yoruba people in North America, there are millions of Igbo people, millions of Gola and Kisi people, Gullah and Geechee people. So everybody is naturally drawn to their spirit genetic group.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. So, what is like when you think about Akan tradition and culture? What does that consist of? Like, you know how sometimes when I go into certain people's homes, I see remnants of in their culture who they really are. You
Right.
know, whether it's colors or certain things they have in their house or the way that they prepare their food or the food they eat, or what is some of that in the Akan tradition? What is some of the
Okay.
culture?
So some of those things you'll find that are more popular when you think about, for example, kente cloth. That's from the Akan tradition. So that's pretty popular. People know about that. When you see Adinkra symbols, like the Sankofa symbol, there are hundreds of Adinkra symbols that makes up a ritual language, a cultural language, but also a ritual language and so forth. Those Adinkra symbols, Sankofa is just one of them. And they're used when you look in for example, the wrought iron works all over America. When you see the Sankofa symbols and other Adinkra symbols in the iron gates and windows and banisters and even on churches, going back a couple of hundred years ago, we were leaving our mark. We were saying, and our calm person was here. So you can go to Louisiana, you can go to New York, you can go to all over the South, everywhere we were enslaved, whether we were on plantations or forced to work in, mills or distilleries or working with iron and so forth, we were leaving our mark on these different places. So the Adinkra symbols still there. The kente cloth ended up being manifest in the quilt work. So we have prolific quilt makers and so forth. Kente is a strip weaving tradition. And since we didn't have the same kind of loom that we had in Ghana, we would just take strips of cloth. Even if we were enslaved and we get scraps, we would take those strips and then recreate those symbols, because kente cloth, the different colors represent different divinities and aspects of nature and so forth. The different patterns and combinations represent certain proverbs and so forth. So we would recreate those stripped motifs in the quilt making tradition. So you'll find that, we have prolific quilt makers in different family blood circles. Those, when you compare them to certain kente cloth patterns, you'll see the ones who are Akan, they're replicating these kente cloth patterns. But then you have other groups who have their own patterns, like people from South Africa, South Africa. If they were descended from that, you'll see them making quilts as well, but they have their own motifs. When you look back to the Xhosa people or some other group, you'll see that they replicated that here. So kente cloth, Adinkra symbols, Akuaba dolls, the so-called fertility dolls that look like ankhs. Those are that's Akan symbolism that represents a divinity, as a matter of fact. I see you have one on your wall. So, right. So that's from Akan tradition. So the so-called stools, which are seats with the crescent moon top, they'll call them an Ashanti stool or, Akan stool, really a throne. Europeans wanted to call it stools because they didn't want to say we had thrones and they had thrones. So they say we had stools and they had thrones. But it's really a seat or a throne. Those are from the Akan tradition as well. So some of the things that are kind of popular, people just wouldn't identify as, Akan motifs, but those are things that we maintained in the Hoodoo tradition as well.
Can I jump in here? Something popped into my mind, Kwesi. When you were talking about doing the quilt work,
right?
A lot of women, I'd say in the South, did that quilt work. Would you agree that it was an ancestral download that allowed them to have those patterns? Because I don't know whether it was word of mouth that they came up with those patterns, but it could have been your own DNA and your own download that would allow you to make those particular patterns in your quilt work.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. It's those downloads. So for example, if someone was Ewe or Fong from, Dahomey or the Aja Empire and so forth, and they were practicing Vodou, and they were quilt makers, their grandmothers were quilt makers, you would see them representing the veves that you see in Vodun, the sacred
Yes.
symbolism and so forth. You'll see them show up on the quilts. Now, the so-called slave master wouldn't know, they'll just think there was a pattern, but they're replicating those veves, and those are ritual matrices that generate a certain specific configuration of energy to draw in the divinity or the ancestral spirit. And Adinkra symbols are the same thing. So if somebody was an Akan and they were making quilts, they would replicate those kente cloth patterns, or they would weave in Adinkra symbols in the patterns, and those become matrices. They're portable shrines, different geometric forms, generate different configurations of energy that provoke the energy of specific divinities. And they would make those quilts. Those downloads are coming from, on one hand, memory, but on the other hand, it's direct. Their ancestral spirit will sometimes possess and draw out the symbol through possession, or sometimes they would show up in dreams, or sometimes some people are clairvoyant. They can see that great grandmother standing right there, and they will show them how to make this, this symbol and what it actually is.
Okay.
What is the balance between man and woman inside the spiritual systems of the economy?
So it's the balance, and that's very important. We focus on that from the beginning, right? Any book that we published going back to 97 up until now, we start off talking about the divine balance of male and female. That is the foundational principle in creation. Because of Christianity, Islam, Judaism, and so forth, the invaders' pseudo-religions, they tried to force monotheism on our people because they wanted to reduce the feminine to first inferior and then just wipe her out totally and say there's no goddess, there's just a God. But there's always been the great God and the great goddess who function together as one divine unit, which is the Supreme Being. So in ancient Kemet and Khanit, Egypt and Nubia, Amen is the great God. Sometimes he's called Amen Ra, but it's Amen because Ra is a different divinity. But Amen is the great God. Amenet, she's the great mother. And from the earliest religious texts, which are the pyramid texts, the Meru texts, you'll see Amen and Amenet together. You'll also see statues, life-size statues, and huge colossal statues of Amenet and Amen, the male and female great mother and father supreme being together. They are Inyamewa and Inyame and Akan. So, and if you look at any tradition, you'll find the great mother and great father function together as one divine unit, the Supreme Being. Now, some of our people have incorporated, some of this imbalance. So we'll be repeating things like some, Ghanaians will say, well, Inyame is the great God and he's the foundation of everything. But they've forgotten about Inyamewa, the great mother, because they were influenced by Christianity. Some Yoruba will say, Olorun, he's the great God and he created everything. The earlier cosmology will say Olorun and Olokun were husband and wife in the beginning before anything else was created. And Vodun is Mawu and Lisa, the great mother and great father in the beginning. So in Akan is Inyame, which is the great father. Inyamewa is the great mother. They balance one another, and then they produce the divinities, which are the Aboson. They are male divinities, gods, and female divinities, the goddesses. And we have ancestresses and ancestors. So we don't say the creator, the gods, and the ancestors. We say the Supreme Being, the great mother and great father, Supreme Being. We say the creator and the creatress, the goddesses, the gods, the ancestresses, and the ancestors. We never leave one out and just, use the masculine term to, deal with both. Everything is foundational. The balance is foundational. It's shown in 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 kidneys, 2 lungs. Everything is balanced.
So
Go ahead. I was just going to say 1 mouth, but go ahead.
Right.
So,
and then the one mouth connected to, that sacred speech coming from the male, but then the female has hers. And then, we communicate together.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened that we got to be where we are right now? Like if I was a descendant of an Akan person in my lineage, I would want to know if we had these great things or these great systems, what happened that we ended up where we are right now? Or when I go to Ghana and I see people who are, you see all of the different ethnic groups, whether if it's people who speak Tree or Ga, or, what happened that we broke into all of these different pieces?
Now, you mean in the sense of what happened during the enslavement, or just as
Just in,
far as?
just in general, like even on the continent of Africa, like people could be right in the space or in the place where all of this great thing happened, and then all of a sudden we broke into 1,000 pieces, where you have
Okay.
all the different tribes and languages, and now monotheism and all this. Like what happened?
Okay. So on one hand, now some of the separation would be a natural separation, and some has to do with conflict occurring, people engaging in internecine warfare, one group trying to dominate another, and then they migrate away and reestablish, that, community. They may give it a different title, and they keep developing, and then hundreds of years later, when the previous group splinters off and comes in contact with the one that is separated, it looks like it's a different group, but they're the same group. But now originally, as far as a natural, separation or a natural expression, it's like the organs in the body. So you have one body, but your heart, your liver, your lungs, your spleen, they have different organs. They have different children, which are the heart cells, liver cells, lung cells, and they are divinely organized. So the children of the liver serve the parent divinity, which is the liver, and when they serve the liver, they serve the whole supreme being, which is you. When the pancreas cells serve their parent divinity, they serve the whole body. So when they execute the function they were given, everything is fine. Those natural divisions of the organs, that's a naturally occurring structure. And we're just a microcosm of the macrocosm. So the great mother and father supreme being, which we will say Nyame and Nyamewa, or Amenet and Amen, or Olokun, Olorun, or Mawu and Lisa, and so forth. That's the great divine body of creation. And the smaller bodies within their body are the organs within the great body that regulate order and creation. And those are the Orisha, the Vodou, the Abosom, and so forth. And then we're children of them. Plant life, animal life, mineral life, and Afurakani, Afurakani, or African human life, Black human life, we're cells within the great divine body. So when you have different organs in the body, they have different functions, and they have children that support those functions. We manifest in different, communal spheres, like the community of cells of the, liver is like a nation into itself. And they're different from the nation of cells in the heart and the nation of cells in the pancreas, but they were designed that way. So that's a natural, separation, but it's not a scission. It's just a natural delineation. But if some cells become cancerous and start trying to eat up everybody else, now that's a problem. And then you have an immune system that will attack them and beat them down and expel them. But if some of them escape and go to other parts of the body and then metastasize and start growing and then come back and start attacking, then you start having a problem. And when there's infighting with the cells, then outside agents that are normally too weak to take the body down can take the body down. If we're fighting amongst one another, if you go outside, if you're not taking care of your immunity, normally you can go outside, people are coughing on you and germs are flying everywhere, and your immune system just naturally, knocks that bacteria out. But if you compromise your immunity because you're not taking care of yourself, not living in a balanced way, then you weaken your immunity, and then you can succumb to some weak little outside bacterial, invasion that normally you could reflect or repel with ease. So when we start infighting because of, power trips and things like that, we start weakening ourselves as a community. And then the outside invader, the whites and their offspring, could come in as the weak, because they're naturally weak. They could never be superior. They could never be even equal to us. But we have to, weaken ourselves in order for them to take control. So when we see, you'll see in ancient Kemet and different civilizations, you'll see us at some point fighting, but then we'll get back together, or we'll separate and build another city and so forth. That's been going on. And we always figure out a way to, ameliorate that. But then when you weaken your immunity and then the parasite comes from the outside, then you open yourself up for infection.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And boy, have we been infected.
Right. Absolutely.
So with that being said, how do you teach people this? Like, how do you do this? How do you get the information out more to our people or the people who are the descendants? Because I think it's not even our people thing. Because if you're telling me there's a direct lineage to something, that does not include everybody.
Right. So you're saying, how do I convey the information? Just introducing people to.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes it would seem like it's a difficult task, but just like they bombard us with misinformation, we have to give our people accurate information. So it starts off with so at this point we've published 31 books, and the ebook versions of all of our books are free downloads. Now we sell the softcover versions, but we made the ebook versions free because we're not going to hold that information ransom for $9 or $10 if people can't afford it. They need to know who they are, their ancestral tradition, their true story. They need to know how these fake religions were manufactured, how these fictional characters like Jesus and Moses and Muhammad and Abraham and Ishmael and all these characters were manufactured because they didn't exist. They were not black. They were not white. They didn't exist, period. So we go into detail to prove that. We show the text from ancient Kemet where these characters were stolen from. They took fragments of names and so forth and manufactured characters and then tried to force them on us so we could start following them instead of following our own ancestresses and ancestors. And when you give that accurate information to people, which they've never had before, it's one thing to say, hey, you shouldn't be doing this, hey, you shouldn't be doing that. But when you give them the proof of that they've never had before, then they have to begin to grapple with that. And then when you speak directly to their cry, you speak directly to their cry, their ori, even you're speaking over their head directly to their spiritual head, that's going to stimulate something within them. Even when you leave them, even if they reject it initially, they're going to be plagued by their own ancestresses and ancestors from that point on because they were trying to teach them that anyway. And then they heard you say it. Now when they go to sleep, when they're walking around, they're going to constantly get hit with that from the outside, but their own ancestresses and ancestors are pressing them and going to force them into a position where they're going to have to, figure it out. Even if they don't want to figure it out at first, they're going to have to do something because they're going to constantly be bombarded with that information. They're not going to be able to rest until they, start investigating. So we start off with the books, publications, but we also have an online institution. We released the documentary film on ancestral divination last year, and that's out as well. So we're just different institutional efforts to get the information out.
So what's the name of the film again?
So the film is Amarukafo Adebisa, and the subtitle is African American Ancestral Divination. So, and it's available online as well. People can download that film online. And what we do is there are 5 of us in the documentary. It's Voodoo Queen Kalinda Laveau, she's out of New Orleans. Rakit Kajada Niyaya Nebehet, who teaches Raseki, she's out of Georgia. Mama Mawusi Ashakir, she's in Cincinnati. And Wabet Seshat Tut Ankwajet, she's in Florida. So, of course, Voodoo Queen Kalinda Laveau is coming from the Edve, the voodoo tradition preserved in the blood circles of North America. Mama Mawusi is dealing with Juju, which is the Yoruba tradition that's preserved in North America over the past 300 years. Seshat is dealing with the Obambo tradition, which is the Gullah tradition preserved in North America for the past few hundred years. I'm dealing with the Hoodoo tradition. And Kajara, who teaches Raseki, she's dealing with the Fang tradition. The Fang people of Cameroon and Gabon, they were forced over here too. And that Raseki healing tradition is part of that Fang ancestral culture. So just like there are a bunch of Yoruba people here and Akan people here and Igbo people here, there are also a bunch of Fang people here. So we're talking about the divination systems that we preserved for hundreds of years in North America and how we preserve those in the families and continue that process. So that's what the film is about.
Right on. What made y'all produce that film?
It is starting on one hand, I've done presentations in different cities and so forth, and we talk about true history and culture and things like that. But the one thing that people are most interested in, even though people, it's kind of sensational to talk about ancient Kemet and, the temples and all of that, and people are like, woo, but, the thing that people are actually most interested in is when we share the information that we never lost our traditions. Because
Yes.
even amongst the, you have some people who are just study history, quote unquote. Some people are more Pan-Africanist. They may be atheists, but they're just studying Pan-Africanism. Some people are studying history. Some people study culture from an anthropological view. But then people who practice ancestral religion, we realized we had to get back to the actual traditions. That undergirds the anthropology and the archaeology and the, language and everything else. But then even when some of us get back to that, we've been conditioned to believe that we didn't preserve anything in North America. The Cubans preserved something, the Haitians preserved something, the people in Brazil preserved something, everybody else preserved something but us. We have to go somewhere else and go find the tradition, because as if we didn't do anything for 300 plus years in North America, we were just sitting around just, but actually we had to prove that we brought the traditions here. We're not dependent on traveling to the continent or the Caribbean or South America for our ancestral religious practices. They're in our blood circles. We preserve the priesthoods, we preserve the priestesshoods, we preserve the divination practices, we preserve everything. Even linguistic things you'll find in these different traditions that turn out to be Akan words or Yoruba words or Ewe words and so forth. So we need to show people, we preserved our tradition. And that's when we brought that out, just going around the country teaching. That's the thing that was more important and intrigued people even more so than, the ancient civilizations and things like that. So that was the key.
So you said something that was quite interesting. You said, and I agree, that because sometimes people will make you think you have to search outside for yourself, that you have to go stand in the Nile, you got to go to the west coast of Africa, you got to go, but I like that you said that it's in your blood circle, which means wherever you go is there.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you went to the moon and couldn't come back, you still taking your blood circle.
Yes.
Exactly.
Right? So in this film, will it be talking about some of those examples that you just gave that's in Black folks' genetic memory or in their bloodline that they do and they don't even know that they're doing it?
Exactly. Exactly. That's exactly what the film is about. So everybody is stealing from their, traditional practice, the voodoo tradition, the hoodoo tradition, the juju tradition, the wanga tradition, the ngangan tradition. And we're showing from, we're all from different parts of the country, all from different traditions. And it's no different than if an Ewe person, an Akan person, a Yoruba person, Ovambo person, and a Fang person on the continent all got together and talked about their traditions. Mm-hmm. Well, that's what we did, because we're Ewe, Akan, Yoruba, Fang, and Ovambo, but we're here. And we're showing how we preserved our specific forms of divination through these traditions, and they were preserved for hundreds of years. So when people see that, they'll be able to look into their own family and say, wait a minute, we had this too. And they'll start, investigating and looking to see what was going on.
Right on.
Can I ask a question here? The Akan word for the Yoruba call it Ori. The Akan call it. Can you spell it?
It's on the male side is okra, just like the food okra.
Oh,
okra.
Okay.
OKRA.
Yes.
And on the feminine side, it can be OKRAA. There's different variants, but okra on the male side, okra on the female side.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. Can this tradition be used as a form of liberation to what's happening right now to Black folks here? Like, how can this be used as a tool for liberation?
In fact, that's foundational period for ancestral religion. There is no liberation without it. We are informed by the same forces in nature that cause the planets to revolve, that empower and animate the sun, moon, the oceans, the atmosphere, and so forth, that animate us. We attune to the forces in nature, even on the individual level, to see how to heal ourselves. So we find out if you have some cancer cells in the body, communicate with the divinity that governs certain plant life and so forth, to find out which plant is the one that will counteract that disruptive, entity within you. George Washington Carver would say he would communicate with plant life early in the morning. Then he would come back to the laboratory and replicate what he learned when he communicated with the spirits in nature. That's why he was able to do what he did and transform the world. He wasn't, not because he went to Iowa, went to a university and was studying amongst Europeans. He went to nature first and then replicated that. So we talk about, for example, we're empowered by the forces in nature on the best means by which to wage war against our enemies and to eradicate our enemies. We did that to free ourselves from enslavement, finding out from the Abosom, the Orisha, and the Nsamanfo, the Egungun, when the Whites in Alice Springs were going to attack, from what direction they were going to attack, which way we needed to, run and so forth, and establish some independent settlements, how to come back in. But even within the tradition, we have the capacity to eradicate our enemies. Root work is the precedent for chemical and biological warfare. We started chemical and biological warfare in America hundreds of years ago. We use root work to find out how to poison to kill our enemies, and then route them, burn down plantations, free our people, set up independent maroon settlements. For example, Dismal Swamp in North Carolina and Virginia, over 2,000 Black people living in the Dismal Swamp, built homes, raising crops for hundreds of years while other people were in slavery. We were over here and we had an armed, militia to protect, the Dismal Swamp. So when Europeans sent their posses in to try to drag us back into enslavement, they were not able to. So, and when you look at the so-called Seminole Wars, they were really the Gullah Wars against the United States. The United States Army was fighting the Gullah, and they never drugged them back to enslavement. And that actually led to the Civil War. So we can use root work, just like this little hybrid, manufactured hybrid virus to shut down the whole world. We have thousands of root workers who can create a hybrid virus and shut down all of our enemies. So from the tradition, we have the capacity to eliminate all of our enemies, and their planes and bombs and tanks and everything will be parked, in hangars and everywhere else, because you can't drive or fly when you're in a hospital bed. So we have the capacity, and it's just been proven, even what they've done here with this little coronavirus to shelter everybody at home for a few months. We've always had that capacity. We just didn't look within our tradition to do so. They did that in the lab. Well, our lab is the forest. Our lab is the Earth Mother. And we can do the same thing on a greater level to eradicate all of our enemies. Just from ancestral religion can bring an end to our enemies. So when we look at our tradition and from that lens, it's the most empowering, because you have no other option but that. You know what I'm saying? So it's so much we can do when we have the proper focus with regard to our traditions.
Wow. You know how you know some stuff, but until you hear it outside of yourself, sometimes it just clicks. Like, I didn't even think about that like that, because I know my dad's people are Gullah, so they're from St. Helena, South Carolina.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
But then when I did all my DNA work, I had Ghana, Congo, and Angola in my line. A lot of Ga from Ghana and some tree and not some trees in anyway.
So now the Gola is the Gullah. So the Gola people and the Kisi people that became pronounced Gullah and Geechee in North America. But the Gola people and Kisi people are related ethnic groups. But that's so the DNA. So the DNA can give you some insight, but depending on which, you can take certain tests that give you the admixture test, and then you have like the AfricanAncestry.com. They give you the mitochondrial DNA from the mother to mother to mother to mother, and then the father to father to father, straight back 2 lines. It can give you some insight, but it may hit on the right group and it may not. So for example, if you're, for example, yourself, before you entered your mother's womb, you were an ancestress. Now, if you were a Gola woman and you got snatched up from that region and forced into North America in 1782, and you're a Gola woman and you're forced over here, now you're growing up in North America. And then they send you to some plantation and they make you breed with somebody and you have a child, your daughter, and then you transition, you're fighting the Whites in Alice Springs and you kill some of them and you transition. and your daughter grows up and she's pouring libation to you, and then she's sent to some other plantation and she's forced to breed with somebody and she has a daughter, which is your granddaughter, and she's pouring libation to you, generation after generation, you'll see your great, 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 great granddaughters and sons growing up in North America until some point, maybe in, 1975 or something, you'll see your great, 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 great granddaughter grow up in North America and get married. And she learned how to communicate with you and some of the other ancestral spirits, but she may not pay much attention because she grew up in America. You know what I mean? So, but it's time for you to return. So when she copulates with her husband, she draws you, that spirit, back into the world for the first time in over 200 years. But as we say in our tradition, the blood may be mixed, but the soul is not, because you're the same Gola woman who came back. Now, the blood mixture that happened over the past 200 plus years, the result will be your skin will be a little bit lighter brown than it would have been if there was no mixture. But you're the same Gola woman. You have other groups of people who mix, but you're the Gola woman. You were living Gola culture. You're speaking Gola language, eating Gola food, and you came back through. Mm-hmm. So you have a lighter brown skin. That's just a war wound because, a wound is evidence that violence took place. So if you have a scar, that's just evidence that something happened. It's also evidence that you healed. When we come back in these light brown bodies, that's just evidence that violence took place in the ancestral blood circle over the past 200 or 300 years. It's also evidence that we won that physiological battle, or else we'll be melanin recessive crackers right now. But we're not. So that melanin won the battle. we're still brown. So, but even though the blood was mixed, your Kra, your Ori is not. You're the same spirit that was living a couple hundred years ago, and you're back. So the different groups you have in your blood circle, like the Ga, may have a Ga grandparent, Yoruba grandparent. That's a Pan-African blood mixture, and you'll have respect for those different groups. But when you grow up and you hear about the Gola or the Gullah people, you're going to be drawn to the Gola culture, the Gola language, because that's the village you used to live in.
That's you, yeah.
And that's all of us.
Woo. I can feel it I can feel it. I can feel the twinging in my body. This viewpoint, this way of looking at who we are, this opening up of our heads, our Ori and our Okra, Okra, is freeing. It frees you. Now, I've been in ATRs or ATS all my life, but I've got to tell you, Kwesi, this has allowed me to almost superimpose a new way of thinking and being and seeing with this eye what's going on and why I've had some of the experiences that I've had. I thank you for that. This is really, really great information, a great way of looking at it. I've just never looked at it that way.
No, man, I'll say that's like, it's like the final step. And the same thing for myself, them showing me that was the final phase. We can learn true historically about information, then we know we need to get back involved in ancestral tradition. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't so that we would stop in West or Central or South Africa. It was to show that once we saw all of that and experienced what they're doing, then to come back to the traditions we preserve, just to confirm the fact that that's what it is. Because even if we're forced over here, even if beyond enslavement, when we used to live in certain parts of the continent, we migrated to a riverine area, and we were from a desert area or something, we had to adjust to the new region. So the plant life there, the animal life there, the mineral life there, we had to learn how to incorporate that if we move thousands of miles away and we used to live in Kemet, and now we live in, West Africa, we're in a different region. When we're forced over here, we're in a different region of the Earth Mother's body. We have to learn about the plant life here, the animal life here, the mineral life here that doesn't exist on the continent. Some things are the same, but some are not. They don't have possums, for example, in Ghana. So you see a possum walking around for the first time, you don't even know what that is. but you will ask the Abosom, you'll ask the Orisha, which one of you governed this animal we've never seen before? Which this animal is an animal totem for which one of you are? And they'll share it with us. And then they will say, okay, well, you can use this animal, and then we use the bones of the possum for possum bone divination. And we're performing divination. We may not have access to cowrie shells, but we have possum bones. And no Akan Okomfo or priest or priestess or no Yoruba or Orisha can come over here and initiate me into how to use possum bone divination.
Exactly.
I can initiate them, but they can't initiate me into the hoodoo tradition. So, and the plant life and animal life and mineral life, what are the dietary taboos for plant life here that we had to learn once we engage this portion of the world, the Earth Mother's body? And we blend ancestral blood circles in this region and take this food and these minerals and these animals into our bodies when we consume, and then we bind ourselves to this region of the Earth Mother's body and we begin to resonate at this frequency. We have a different energetic complex. It's related, but it's slightly different because we moved and we're connected to this region of the Earth Mother. So we indigenize ourselves when we invoke the divinities as they manifest in this region and connect with the Earth Mother and the plant life, animal life, and mineral life here and incorporate that in our bodies. We forge a new Western Afurakani or African identity based on blending ancestral blood circles in this region of the Earth Mother. So our culture is going to be slightly different. It's foundationally the same, but it's going to be slightly different.
Yes.
And only we are the experts in that culture because we went through that process of indigenizing ourselves to this region of the Earth Mother.
Yes.
So you I think one of the areas where I see people get tripped up in, and you just cleared this up so beautifully, when you talked about blood and soul. So you'll have Black people talk about how mixed they are.
Right.
Like for me, that always kind of got on my nerves. I'd be like, I'm a pure blood. I'll say that just to mess with people because I feel like that's your distraction.
It is.
I never hear our enemy spend time on that. He's just busy out there conquering the world. Because of his soul, he think he's the conqueror. and he acts on it. So what is this difference between blood and soul?
Okay, and that's very important because, you'll see it on Facebook, people going crazy talking about these things and making, life decisions based on, some philosophy they learned from somebody who either wasn't part of our culture or, had a misunderstanding. So if you just in general, if you have a male and a female, they were children growing up in different areas. And at some point, these children, this boy grows up into a man, girl grows up into a woman, and at some point they come together. But before they met, when they were just babies growing up from childhood to adulthood, they were living in their families and they had ancestresses and ancestors connected to their blood circles. So when this boy who became a man comes to this city and meets this girl who grew up into a woman and comes to this city, his ancestral community is connected to him, her ancestral community is connected to her. And then they get married and they copulate. And when they have a child, either they're going to pull one of his people back into the womb or they're going to pull one of her people back into the womb. It's going to be one or the other. So if they pull one of his people back, then that child is going to be born. And that child is an ancestor of his. Now he's going to have a relationship with the ancestresses and ancestors of her clan, but she helped to bring one of his people back. If she brings one of her people back, he just helped facilitate bringing one of her people back. So when we look at our children, we see an ancestor or an ancestress return. If a man is looking at his wife and they have a child, if it's one of her people, say, oh, we brought one of your people back. And we're glad to help you bring one of your people back. Or she helped bring one of my people back. She's glad to help, bring one of our people back and fuse, pull our families together once again. Now, if somebody, copulates with the enemy, they make that foolish decision to pollute themselves physically and spiritually by copulating with one of the whites in their offspring. It's the same thing. If you have a Black man and a white female and they end up copulating, either one of her people is going to be brought back through or one of his people is going to be brought back through. they don't like the fact you got with the white female. You're gonna force one of them to come through a white womb. They come out looking like Obama or whatever. You're forcing them to do it. But that doesn't always happen. Sometimes they bring one of the white females back into the womb. Some white Irish cracker from 1830. And he gets pulled in, but then he comes out looking like Obama. Is he one of our people? Absolutely not. He's that same cracker who just is operating a wolf in sheep's clothing. But if it's one of his people who came back, it's one of our people. And you can kind of tell just instinctively when you see a mulatto which side of the family they incarnated from.
Yeah.
If it's one of the black ones, you know who they are.
Yeah.
If it's the white one, you know who they are. But you can find out for sure through divination if you want to know. But typically they show themselves before you even get to that point.
Yeah. And both of us are shaking our heads or holding our heads and just
talking about.
Yeah. Boy, the revelation, the information, the way you put it, it makes perfect sense, and it allows us to understand ourselves and what is going on much better. Yeah. Why do we have those feelings of seeing a black man and a white woman, or a white man and a black? Why does that stir us up, a lot of us? And you cleared that up for me. Thank you.
No problem.
Oh, go ahead, please, brother.
I was going to say sometimes it's not only the fact that they, depending on who they bring back, they can bring back some person from Ireland from the 1800s, or they can bring back their great-great-grandfather, who was a slave master, who was torturing our people. And now that slave master is growing up as a child of a black man who maybe that slave master was torturing one of his grandparents the last time they were here. And now you're raising him. That's your child. So, or quote unquote child. And then very often they'll split from the family and they don't talk to each other. And there's a reason for that. So every time there's a split in the family, it's not a bad thing. So.
Yeah.
I'm doing the breather move because I feel like you just gave me another spiritual lens, because I see things in lenses. I actually learned that terminology from somebody else who, when you try to make people see things the way you want to, this person said to me once, like, hold on, I only know this through my lens. I don't walk around with your lens. I walk around with my lens. And so when this person said this to me, that helped me to understand how I see Rolanda. So when you gave that example about how souls come back, that totally took the blood right out of it. That's number one, because all black people base their stuff on most times when they talk about being mixed is in blood.
Exactly.
We always talking about blood, but we never talk about soul.
Soul.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because soul is whole. There aren't pieces of it like that. Like you could do that with blood and say a quarter this, half this, quadroon, octoroon, whatever. But when the soul is whole and complete, there is no. So when you said that, immediately I started thinking about people who came back. Like I have a really good friend, both of her parents are mixed. Sometimes she rolled blacker than the blackest person I've ever met in my whole life. I've seen her do stuff where it's like, do you know who you are? But that was her job. She came back looking like that, but she black. You know what I mean? She know how to be like, no, part of her job is to do that to white people. I'm not going to do it because I get tired of raising them. I don't want to do that. But she does it in such a way, like that's part of her mission in coming. That was her soul mission. And she didn't even know it. You know what I'm saying? And so you explained that so well, like where it was like, okay, that's what we need to, because that blood thing just gets a little confusing sometimes. It gets ridiculous. But when you talk whole as the soul, you have to deal with yourself in a different kind of way. And it's like when people show up and you see their soul for real, ain't really much you can do about that. But, you know, be like, this is who this person is, and we ain't fooling with them like that. You know what I mean?
It goes to identity. we look for our identity, but identity is not just your recent history and certain interactions. Your identity, first and foremost, is your spiritual anatomy and where you came from, and the difference between. And when we use our own terminology, then it's a different thing. So the Whites and Offspring, the term spirit and soul, they'll just kind of, interchange those. But when we use our own terminology, the spirit, the spirit body is the force that animates you, personality and so forth. But your kra, your soul, your krawa, the Ori Nu, that's a divinity in the head region that communicates with us. That's a divinity. So it's a male divinity if you're male, a female divinity if you're female. That's assigned to install in your head region. And every group has a name for it. The Igbo call it the Chi, and Efe people call it the Selido, and Yoruba people Ori Nu, and we call it the Okra, and so forth. So it's a divinity that guides us, that was assigned to us by the Supreme Being to, show us what's in harmony with divine order. And if we align with that divinity, we do what we need to do. But if we don't, we have a problem. But Black people are the only ones with that divinity that's installed in the head region. We have a spirit body, but we have a soul that governs us. Asians, Europeans, they have spirit bodies, but they don't have a divinity installed in the head region. So that's what separates us spiritually, our spiritual anatomy. That's why they don't have a word for it. They don't have a concept of a divinity in the head region. They have the word spirit that they learned from us, but they don't have that concept in their culture because it doesn't exist. They don't have a concept of spiritually cultivated elder ancestresses and elders ancestresses either, because they don't have it. We have, Nsamafo, the deceased relatives, and Nananom Nsamafo, the spiritually cultivated, honored ancestresses and ancestors, or Egungun as opposed to Egun. We have different classes because we have different classes. They got one class, dead crackers. That's it. That's all they have. And none of them are spiritually cultivated. So they're the viral agents,
Yes.
within the body. So
Yes.
that's how it is.
Yes.
The cancer cells that have, degenerated within the great black body of humanity, until we expel those cancer cells, going to seek to consume and destroy everything in their path, just like cancer cells in the body now. They will seek to eat up everything unless your immune system arrests their development and expels them. And they've only been here for a few thousand years, and they will be out of here soon, as long as we do what we need to do. It's about identity and knowing who's who and what's what.
All right. All right. I got that for real. Like, that just makes so much sense. Like, that right there should be a lesson in the base of everything.
Yes.
That's something to learn first, because that'll take care of all the confusion. The person wouldn't have to hear to me as a white man for me to listen. Like, all of that will go away.
Right.
Yeah. That's like the foundation. If you got that, then you can build. You understand yourself so much better. You understand your people so much better. You understand what's really happening, what's going on so much better. It's like, remember, Ro, I said you have those aha moments? Well, these past 60 minutes have been, all of them have been an aha moment for me. That light bulb is going on and on and on and on. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. What a blessing this day has been just from that teaching.
So, brother, I'm going to share. I shared where you can get the video. I'm sharing your Facebook page with everyone in case y'all want to reach out to the brother, as you should. I know you do classes, correct?
Yeah, so we have we have an online institution, and we have some classes going right now. And then the courses that we've taught, most of them are 6-week courses, and we have 19 courses that we have. 2 of them are live right now. The other 17 are archived. So even if people miss the 6-week course, you can go and obtain the 6-week course, the archive version. So the regular live version, 6-week courses is $5 a week, so it's a $30 course. And we go through the books that we've published and articles and other things, and the books are free downloads. The archive courses are half price at $15 or $10 for the archive course, and people can access those. We were doing Blog Talk Radio a few years back, and we have like 353 of those shows archived. You can download those for free at any time. And then the 31 books, the ebook versions are free. You can download those if people want to purchase the soft covers. We have that as well. And then the film, the documentary film, and we're working on the second film. We're going to have in November. By then, everything should be open back up. But we're going to have our first annual Conjure Film Festival. So the films that are going to be shown are films based on the Conjure tradition, whether it's hoodoo or juju or voodoo or wanga, the traditions we preserved in North America, films revolving around that. So we're going to have that first film festival in November. So we have that information on the page. But we're working on the second film for that.
Where?
That's going to be in Washington, D.C. And that's we have annual conferences as well, like on Ancestral Religion in March. In June, we have the Nation Building Conference, the Ojeda Mind Conference. And in October, we've yearly had the Hoodoo Mind, Hoodoo Nation Festival that focuses on the Hoodoo tradition. But this, we've been doing that for the past 6 years, these 3 annual conferences in DC. But things were shut down this year as far as, in March, everything shut down. So we had to do the Etchy Conference online, the Ancestral Religious Reversion Conference online. And we'll probably be doing the Ojeda Mind, the Nation Building Nationism Conference online as well in June because of everything that's happening. But by the fall, everything should have opened back up, and then we'll start having the events once again.
So the festival, I'm sharing that now too on the page. This is going to take place in October, correct?
So we have 3 different annual conferences, but then the Conche Film Festival, that one's going to be November 7th. At first it was going to be October, but then we had to switch it. So the new page, it should say November 7th, the film festival.
Okay. All right, good. So I shared those. I just think this is so important. I'm also really big into demystifying information like this, because that's how the enemy keeps winning, because we keep believing the crap instead of finding out for yourself and talking to people. And we live in a world where things are more accessible than we think. You don't need a permit to talk to your ancestors. You really don't. You don't need a special degree to do that. As you said, it's in your bloodline, it's in your soul line. It's who you are, but that's going to take some work. No easily made thing is going to help you like that. It don't work like that. So I thank you so much, brother, for your time. I'm so grateful. Ia, did you want to say anything in closing before we wrap it up?
Yeah, I'm going to go to the site and all of that. But I got to tell you, I could sit with you forever, damn near. I want to pull all that information out of you so that it can make things so much clearer for me, and then I can share it with other people. You see, this is you have really given me some meat, not fluff, but some real meat to work with and to think about, and to put. You've helped me put pieces of the puzzle together.
I know.
Yeah, and it's spiritual. Spirit sent you here to do the work that you're doing so that you can uplift your people with the truth.
Absolutely.
I know.
Appreciate it.
What would you like to say in closing, dear brother?
Well, first of all, Yeda, I say thank you. Appreciate you for inviting me on the platform. Appreciate you both. And, the reason anything would resonate is because that's the information that's already in us.
Yeah.
And then we can just say it out loud, what's, going on inside. Like you said, sometimes you have to say something out loud to, hear what they've been sharing with us inside the entire time. And that's why it resonates, because it was, these are the things that have been communicated to us since we've been here. and we just need to bring that out. And once we bring it out and, disseminate it, share it, then our people get back on track. We embolden ourselves, we empower ourselves, we, immunize ourselves, and then we can do everything we need to do. So I really appreciate your platform. I appreciate you both, because it's, sometimes you see a lot of, brothers going around preaching. It needs to be many more sisters, young as well as elders and eldresses, and in between, sharing this information, whether it's books, whether it's, broadcasts like this, platforms, podcasts. It needs to be that balance you asked about in the beginning. So I appreciate that.
Well, thank you, dear brother. All right, family, we've come to another ending of African Spiritual Conversations. I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. And please, if you get a chance, follow us on Facebook at Earth Mama Network, or on Twitter at Earth Mama Network, or on the YouTube. Subscribe to Earth Mama Network, and we shall see you all tomorrow. Peace and blessings, family.